It often feels quite unfair. You diligently clean up your diet, meticulously count calories, and perhaps even forego that extra slice of bread. Your face appears slimmer, your arms become more defined, and the number on the scale drops. Yet, that stubborn belly fat remains stubbornly in place, as if oblivious to your efforts. This can be particularly frustrating because it feels personal, as though your body is deliberately clinging to the very area you most want to change. However, the truth is far more complex and intrinsically human than simple genetic predispositions or a lack of effort. That soft layer around your midsection isn't merely an extra energy reserve. It behaves more like a living system, responding to hormones, stress, and unconscious survival cues you might not even realize you're sending. Your abdomen isn't ignoring your hard work. It's reacting to your fundamental biology. If you've ever felt discouraged, embarrassed, or frustrated watching every part of your body transform except your waistline, rest assured, you're not alone. More than half of adults over 45 in the US experience this exact pattern. Weight decreases, but inches don't. But once you grasp why the body treats belly fat differently, why it protects it, defends it, and refuses to release it until specific conditions are met, you begin to perceive the entire journey through a completely different lens. To fully comprehend this process, we must retrace our steps to the precise moment you first reduced your caloric intake. What many people fail to realize is that belly fat isn't simply inert. It actively responds to signals your body has been transmitting for years. In fact, your midsection acts less like a storage cupboard and more like a biological vault, meticulously guarded because it safeguards organs your body deems indispensable. This is precisely why, the instant you begin eating less, your abdomen doesn't readily say, "Excellent, let's burn this first." Instead, its response is, "Hold on, something's shifting. Let's not touch the emergency reserve just yet." This protective instinct is not a flaw. It's evolution performing precisely as intended. Your ancestors survived droughts, severe winters, and prolonged periods of unreliable food sources because their bodies developed the ability to defend their most strategic energy zones. Belly fat was never intended for cosmetic purposes. It was designed as a crucial form of insurance. So, when you feel your waistline resisting your efforts, it's not defiance, it's your biological system striving to keep you alive, as it always has. However, this is where it gets interesting. Once you understand the rules governing this biological vault, you can finally begin to unlock. That understanding commences the moment your body detects the first reduction in energy intake. And as confusing as this might seem currently, the good news is that your body adheres to a clear, predictable, and surprisingly forgiving pattern once you finally understand it. In the next few minutes, you'll discover precisely how this pattern unfolds, when your body decides to cease panicking, when it genuinely begins to burn fat, and what silently prevents so many from ever reaching that stage. Because simply reducing calories doesn't automatically trigger fat-burning mode. Your biology has its own specific checklist, and the moment you learn how that checklist operates, everything will start to make sense. When you initially cut calories, your body doesn't instantly flip a switch and start incinerating belly fat. What actually transpires is far less dramatic and far more inherently human. Your brain registers the drop in energy as a subtle tremor, an unexpected alteration in the daily rhythm. Its primary instinct isn't to burn fat, but to stabilize the entire system. This is why the initial phase of a diet can, for some individuals, feel surprisingly energizing. Your liver begins releasing stored glycogen, the readily available fuel your body keeps on hand for precisely such moments. Consider it the backup battery your metabolism utilizes before it even contemplates tapping into stored fat. For many, this is exactly where the illusion of progress begins. Take Linda, for example, a 62-year-old who initiated a modest calorie deficit, believing she was finally doing everything correctly. After just 2 days, she stepped on the scale and observed a nearly 3-pound reduction. She felt proud, even hopeful. However, what she didn't realize was that she hadn't yet burned a single pound of fat. She had only depleted glycogen stores and the water associated with them. This isn't a failure. It's the warm-up phase, the period when your body attempts to gain time and ascertain whether this energy shortage is temporary or a genuine shift. That crucial decision then dictates everything that follows. As your glycogen levels decrease, something else occurs in the background. something almost every dieter mistakenly interprets as genuine progress. Glycogen is not stored in isolation. For every gram your body retains, it binds approximately 3 to 4 grams of water. Consequently, when glycogen is consumed, that water is expelled along with it. This is why the scale can drop rapidly, sometimes astonishingly so, in the first few days. It feels magical, as if you've discovered some secret fat-burning code. But the reality is far more mundane. It isn't fat loss yet. It's simply water exiting your system. And this distinction is vital because failing to understand it will lead you to misinterpret the entire journey. This is precisely what happened to Linda. She wasn't losing 3 pounds of fat. She was shedding water that her body no longer required once glycogen began to deplete. And here's the crucial point. That initial drop is actually a positive sign. Not because it signifies fat burning, but because it indicates that your insulin levels are finally starting to decline. Lower insulin is the first genuine green light your body grants before it will touch stored fat. However, that green light doesn't activate overnight. It comes later, after your body has concluded whether this calorie deficit is a fleeting moment or a sustained change. Just when you believe things are progressing favorably, the scale suddenly stalls. Not even an ounce drops. Sometimes, it even creeps back up. For most people, this is the moment when their spirits plummet. The initial excitement fades, self-doubt creeps in. Is this calorie deficit merely a short-lived blip, a missed meal here or there? Or is it a consistent pattern that necessitates a more profound adjustment in how energy is managed? Linda encountered this exact hurdle at the end of her first week. Her weight remained stagnant for 4 consecutive days, leading her to panic and become convinced that all her efforts were futile. However, what she didn't realize was that her body was finally stabilizing after the rapid water loss. And this stabilization is necessary because your metabolism will not transition into deeper fat-burning territory until it feels secure enough to do so. This pause is not a stop sign. It's a critical checkpoint that directly precedes the next phase. If you maintain consistency, once your body confirms that the calorie deficit is not a temporary event, it subtly shifts into what scientists term metabolic adaptation. While the phrase sounds intimidating, the reality is surprisingly straightforward. Your metabolism is instinctively learning how to protect you. As energy intake remains low, your body becomes slightly more efficient. It starts conserving fuel, reducing non-essential processes, and adjusting hormones like ghrelin and leptin to keep you vigilant for food. This explains why hunger can suddenly intensify, even if your meals haven't changed. It's not a sign of weakness. It's your biology reminding you that survival has always depended on securing sufficient energy. Linda experienced this phenomenon in week 2. Out of the blue, she felt hungrier at night, more restless in the early morning, and surprisingly fatigued after short walks. She mistakenly assumed her metabolism had slowed down, but what was actually happening was far more strategic. Her body wasn't shutting down, it was reorganizing its energy budget, ensuring that essential functions were covered while it determined whether fat reserves should finally be accessed. This slight deceleration is not negative news. In fact, it's one of the clearest indications that your body is preparing for a more profound metabolic shift. And that shift, the one everyone strives so hard to achieve, is the next crucial step. If there's one aspect of this journey that most people never learn about, it's the complex hormonal dialogue unfolding beneath every decision your body makes. Because fat loss, especially abdominal fat loss, isn't solely about calories. It's fundamentally about biochemical processes. 3 hormones in particular quietly dictate whether your body burns fat or keeps it securely locked away like a vault. The first is insulin, the primary energy storage hormone. When insulin levels are persistently high, typically due to frequent snacking, sugary foods, or years of erratic blood sugar, your body simply refuses to release stored fat. It's akin to attempting to open a safe while its lock remains engaged. Only when insulin consistently begins to fall does fat even become an accessible option. Then there's cortisol, the well-known stress hormone. Cortisol doesn't just influence fat storage, it dictates where fat is deposited, and its preferred location is the abdomen. High stress levels, insufficient sleep, long workdays, and consuming caffeine late at night, all these factors send the same signal: protect the center. This is why cortisol belly is so prevalent, particularly in adults over 50. Finally, there's leptin, the hormone responsible for signaling to your brain that you've consumed enough food. When leptin is balanced, cravings are subdued, hunger feels predictable, and fat loss becomes more manageable. However, when leptin is disrupted, often a consequence of chronic dieting or poor sleep, your hunger signals become louder, more chaotic, and less trustworthy. Linda unknowingly battled this complex hormonal triad. She wasn't just contending with calories, she was wrestling with insulin that required time to decrease, cortisol accumulated from years of demanding nights, and leptin confused by entrenched dietary habits. Until these three hormones settle into a new, harmonious rhythm, the fat-burning mode simply will not activate. Nevertheless, once insulin's hold loosens, cortisol's alarm subsides, and leptin balances, the body's internal reserve finally opens. This marks the beginning of true transformation. When your hormones stabilize, a subtle yet remarkable shift occurs. Your metabolism, which had been cautiously operating, transitions from relying on a constant glucose supply to utilizing stored fat. This phenomenon, termed metabolic flexibility by researchers, is a critical turning point in the entire process. It's not flashy or dramatic, but profoundly effective. As glycogen levels remain low, your liver commences converting stored fat into ketones, a purer and more consistent energy source that both your brain and muscles readily embrace. Many individuals experience this without recognizing its significance. They report waking up with enhanced mental clarity, sustained energy levels, and the disappearance of late afternoon slumps. The intense cravings for sugar diminish. This is the initial indication that your body is finally transitioning into fat-burning mode. Linda experienced these changes intuitively before fully understanding them. One morning, she realized she hadn't considered food until nearly noon, not due to restriction, but because her hunger had fundamentally altered. Her body was no longer demanding immediate energy fixes. It was learning to operate on a deeper reserve. The intriguing aspect is the variability of this shift. It can manifest in as little as 4 days or extend to 2 full weeks, influenced by factors such as stress, insulin sensitivity, sleep quality, and dietary history. Despite these individual differences, one constant remains. Once metabolic flexibility is established, your body gains the capacity to burn fat in a manner it hasn't in years. What follows elucidates why the fat you perceive, particularly abdominal fat, appears to be the last to diminish. This next point often surprises people. Once your body achieves the flexibility to burn fat, it doesn't immediately target the visible fat. Instead, it begins with the fat that is not externally apparent. Deep within your abdomen lies visceral fat, a hazardous type that encases organs like the liver, pancreas, and intestines. Due to its metabolic activity and abundance of signaling receptors, visceral fat burns significantly faster than subcutaneous fat, the soft layer beneath your skin. Scientists estimate that visceral fat can reduce up to 3 times more quickly than the outer belly fat that is typically a source of concern. This implies that while you may notice no change in your waistline, a significant process is unfolding internally, with your organs becoming healthier even before outward physical changes are observed. Linda was unaware of this internal transformation. Her physician, however, noted improvements in her fasting glucose, reduced cholesterol, and lower inflammation markers long before her clothes fit more loosely. Your body inherently prioritizes survival over aesthetics, thus targeting dangerous fat first, the fat that poses a threat to your long-term health. Only after this inner layer starts to recede does your body begin to draw from subcutaneous fat, the pinchable fat on your lower abdomen that often seems intractable. This is precisely why abdominal fat appears so stubborn. It's not the first to go, but virtually the last. Yet, once this stage is reached, visible changes occur more rapidly than anticipated. Even after your body gains the ability to burn fat, the rate and sustainability of this process depend on the subtle daily choices you make, often unconsciously. While people tend to view fat loss as a mathematical equation, it is more accurately a rhythm shaped by movement, rest, and stress. Begin with movement. Strength training is not solely for muscle building. It significantly increases your body's caloric expenditure even during sedentary activities like sitting, driving, or sleeping. Muscle tissue is metabolically demanding, meaning the more you possess, the more energy your body extracts from stored fat without additional effort. High-intensity interval training further enhances this effect. The afterburn phenomenon can maintain an elevated metabolism for 24 to 36 hours post-workout. Additionally, even simple activities matter. Walking, light cycling, gardening, or cleaning, these forms of non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT, quietly burn more calories throughout the day than most individuals realize. Next is sleep, an often overlooked component until its absence becomes impactful. Deep sleep is crucial for recalibrating hunger hormones, repairing tissues, and balancing cortisol. Insufficient sleep leads to increased cravings, decreased patience, and persistent abdominal fat, regardless of dietary quality. Stress completes this triad. Elevated cortisol levels represent a potent biochemical signal instructing your body to store fat, particularly in the midsection. Linda initially struggled to understand her late-night carbohydrate cravings, attributing it to a lack of willpower. In reality, it was chronic cortisol from years of demanding shifts, late-night coffee, and disturbed sleep patterns. These lifestyle elements don't just influence fat loss, they direct it, determining whether your body feels secure enough to release fat or compelled to retain it. Collectively, they explain why the fat you most desire to eliminate often resists until one final biological barrier is overcome. Even when practicing all the recommended habits, calorie control, better sleep, smarter training, abdominal fat frequently remains the last to disappear. There is a biological explanation for this stubbornness. The fat around your midsection contains fewer beta-adrenergic receptors, which are responsible for releasing fat into the bloodstream for burning. Simply put, your abdomen does not respond as readily to fat-burning signals as other body areas. Furthermore, blood flow to abdominal fat is lower compared to regions like your arms or legs. Since fat can only be burned when transported by blood, reduced blood flow equates to slower progress, irrespective of effort. The situation is even more complex for adults over 50. Years of elevated insulin, chronic stress, disrupted sleep, and hormonal fluctuations, especially during menopause or andropause, designate the midsection as the body's preferred fat storage site. From a biological perspective, the abdomen is not merely a cosmetic concern, but a strategic reserve. Linda discovered this through experience. Her face slimmed, her legs became more toned, and her energy improved, yet her waistline showed minimal change. Her discipline was not the issue. It was her physiology prioritizing survival over appearance. Once you comprehend that abdominal fat is the last fat your body is willing to release, frustration subsides as you finally understand your body's underlying priorities. The question everyone anticipates is this: when does actual abdominal fat loss truly commence? Not water weight, not glycogen depletion, nor wishful thinking, but genuine reduction of fat from your midsection. For most individuals adhering to a consistent calorie deficit, adequate sleep, stress management, and stable insulin levels, this milestone typically occurs between week 3 and week 6. This period is characterized by persistently low glycogen, harmonizing hormones, and metabolic flexibility becoming the new standard. However, for many adults, especially those with insulin resistance, a history of yo-yo dieting, or years of elevated stress, this transition can take longer. Some might not enter true abdominal fat-burning mode until week 8 or even week 12. This is not indicative of failure, but rather physiology adapting to patterns established over decades. Linda's experience fell within this extended time frame. She waited, doubted herself, then one morning noticed her waist felt subtly different. Not dramatically, but perceptibly tighter. This is how abdominal fat loss truly begins. Quietly, gradually, and almost always later than people expect. The crucial element is not speed, but consistent adherence long enough for your biology to respond reliably to the signals. You will not awaken one day to a suddenly flatter belly or a magically smaller waist. Fat-burning mode does not announce itself loudly. It enters subtly, almost imperceptibly, altering how you feel long before it changes your appearance. One of the primary indicators is steady, predictable energy. Instead of experiencing mid-afternoon energy crashes or waking up feeling sluggish, your body feels more balanced, as if chaos has diminished and clarity has increased. Then come the changes in cravings, or more precisely, their absence. The urgent desire for something sweet after dinner or that mid-morning snack attack begins to fade. Sugar no longer feels like an emergency. Hunger becomes calmer, more rational, and less emotionally driven. Your body no longer desperately seeks quick glucose because it is learning to sustain itself on fat in the background. Another shift is observed in mood. Individuals report feeling more patient, focused, and less reactive. Sleep deepens. Waking up feels different, less of a struggle, more of a restorative reset. While the scale may show minimal movement, your clothes begin to fit a little more comfortably, not dramatically, but subtly enough for you to notice. These are the biological whispers signaling that your metabolism has crossed a threshold. Your body is no longer merely chasing energy, it is generating it. Once these signs emerge, you are closer to visible change than you realize. Achieving fat-burning mode is a significant milestone, but sustaining it is where the true transformation unfolds. Your body requires more than just a calorie deficit. It needs a consistent relationship. Once your metabolism becomes adept at using fat efficiently, your role is to maintain an environment stable enough for this process to continue. Perfection is not required. In fact, it often proves counterproductive. What is effective is sustaining a rhythm your body can trust. Sufficient protein to protect muscle, regular strength training to keep your metabolism active, evening walks to reduce cortisol, and a sleep schedule your hormones can rely on. Additionally, a surprising element is that strategically eating a little more occasionally can actually be beneficial. A single day with a slightly higher carbohydrate intake, often termed a refeed day, can help reset leptin levels, alleviate cortisol, and signal to your metabolism that you are not in a state of starvation. Effective fat loss isn't about imposing stricter rules. It's about diminishing the inherent fear your body holds. Linda realized this the moment she ceased meticulously tracking every calorie and instead concentrated on adopting a lifestyle that felt manageable. She didn't have to train like a professional athlete or adhere to the strict diet of a monk. All she required was sufficient consistency, around 80%, to maintain her metabolism in a fat-burning state. When she embraced this approach, her progress didn't merely continue, it accelerated exponentially. This encapsulates the entire principle. The instant your habits transition into a lifestyle, your body's fat-burning capability becomes its default mode, rather than a fleeting, fortunate occurrence. By the time you reach this milestone in your journey, a profound internal shift occurs. You cease to perceive persistent belly fat as a penalty and begin to interpret it as communication, your body's protective mechanism, long before you ever decided to initiate change. Ultimately, when you provide your biology with the necessary time, consistency, and a sense of security, your body responds in its inherent manner. Initially, the changes are slow and subtle, then for a period, quiet, before manifesting almost abruptly as evident, significant transformation. Fat loss was never intended to be a battle against your body. Rather, it is a dialogue with it. The moment you master its language through balanced hormones, more consistent sleep, improved physical activity, and a sustainable rhythm, that's when everything begins to align. This shift doesn't stem from intensified effort, but from working in harmony with your metabolism's natural design. So, if you are currently navigating this process, or if you have experienced frustration, or if you feel that nothing is changing, remember this: you are not behind schedule. You are not flawed, and your journey is not over. You are in the phase where most individuals give up, precisely when their body is on the verge of releasing excess weight.
This video is for educational purposes only and isn't medical advice. If you have any medical conditions or take prescription medications, please talk to your doctor before making any changes.